With us today. I have the immense pleasure of hosting Mr. Yogesh Sareen, Director Supply Chain at Dell Technologies, South Asia. Mr. Sareen is a supply chain professional with more than 25 years of experience in establishing greenfield startups for major consumer electronics and telecom products. Mr. Yogesh has driven multiple digital transformations for process optimization across companies. He's also held key leadership roles in companies such as HCL, Samsung, Ecotech, and Dell. At Dell Technologies, he leads the South Asia service parts operations. And additionally, he leads Dell's Progress Made Real initiative for Global Service Parts Operations Organization. Sir, I've been following your articles on LinkedIn, and I'm a total fan of the specific industry insights that you share on supply chain leadership. We're really honored to have you with us here, sir, today. And the floor is open for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Arya. And thank you all for having me here. And I do believe strongly that the session here, I see close to 200 participants. And one of the common passion that we all share is supply chain that brings us together. So I strongly believe we'll have some good sharing. And I really mean to, when I say sharing, which means after end of presentation, I would really encourage an interactive Q&A that enhances my knowledge also. Now, another passion that most of us share is cricket. So good news is that IPL final starts at 8 p.m. So no worries, I'm not going to be in between the final match and our presentation. So I'll be off much before. So with that, I'll just quickly start. Let me know when my screen is visible.
It's visible, sir.
You guys can see the screen. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to talk about supply chain transformations today. And I would begin with the introduction or a very bold statement here, which also answers to a large extent as to why do organizations need to transform their supply chain. And the answer lies here that if you don't, you would be extinct. So this is something that each of us should soak in, that it's not anymore an optional stuff for any organization as to say that they may or may not do any transformation. It's a survival. They must do. So that's what each organization should do. So let's dwell more into what kind of supply chain transformations do organizations do. And I picked some of them there. There could be more, but these are some prime ones that takes to the next slide. Now, in next few minutes, I'll try to dwell into details of these as to how each of these transformation techniques can help in our or any organization supply chain transformation journey. Right? Here we go. We start with advanced analytics. Now, you would have most commonly heard this word today on how much data-driven decisions are being driven. And yes, advanced analytics does talk about how supply chain can be helped in or can be improvised, optimized, processes can be improved by use of advanced analytics. And here are some of the ways to do it. You can improve profitability. How you do it? You can do a value analysis where you increase the cost of goods and services or enhance value for customers. You give them a faster delivery, you give them visibility of when what is coming, or you at least tell them a good, dependable, reliable ETA or time of arrival. And then very important, what most industries use is to develop models by the data they have, and then use those models to do simulations for scenarios which may happen. Now, of course, we all know about pandemic and those are models or scenarios which nobody might have ever created. They may now do, but never before. But a lot of those scenarios in terms of demand fluctuations, in terms of supply disruptions, a lot of things can be done without making those serious mistakes by actually using data on what if analysis by doing those simulations. Another very important analytics which drives customer experiences, and we all know that we are talking about business organizations, and the NGOs and charitable stuff is kept aside. So each organization is there for a profitable journey. And for any business, if you know Kaplan's, that balance scorecard, you would know that customer buys a product, so your financial goals are met. And your financial goals are met because your products and services are worth to be bought by the customer. And to do that, you'll have to have good operations in place. Good means robust operations, evolving operations, constantly trying to understand what a customer may need to make your supply chain as reliable as possible. Uncertainties need to be removed. How you do it? You do it by predictive sequencing of right from sourcing, manufacturing, distribution, aftermarket services. You go through the length and breadth of what a customer may experience and how that journey can be better by improvising experience, at least by giving constant feedbacks. There are ways and tools to do, we'll not get there, but some of the ways are net promoter score, where company tries to understand that, did you like the product or service? One question says it all. So if you're a promoter, they would like to indulge more on enhancing the strengths of product. If you're a detractor, which are not so happy about the product, they would like to understand more on how they can bring in. So a lot of data on the feedback that you may send in surveys or other feedback to your customer service portals actually goes into making a loop towards product getting or a service getting better for a customer experience that needs to be improved. I get on to a third important stuff in supply chain analytics, which is working capital. Now we all would know that a working capital is your monies or your finance that's available for day-to-day needs or to meet your current obligations. And it's always desirable to have your customers pay you cash or in advance, but your suppliers give you credit. Now that's the third part here, which is the payment cycle. So how you actually deal with negotiate with make your contracts with your supplier determines the payment cycle. Are you able to negotiate a 30, 60, 90 or more days of payment, while your sales is able to contribute by getting spot payments? That really helps in your working capital improvement. And directly on supply chain, obviously, all the inventory in the warehouses is like money in bank. So the more you optimize, more you make it use-worthy, less aged and slow-moving inventory will actually make your supply chain more and more efficient. Same goes for lead time. If you've got longer lead time in your procurement contracts, it is likely that turbulence, disturbance would make you off your track. Something similar has been happening since last year, not by pandemic, to some extent by that, but the semiconductor shortages. Currently, as we speak, it's been like 2 months or probably more. China, specific areas in China are closed down, are locked down. Again, COVID impact, but it's totally locked down. And the impact, if you've got your suppliers there, you really have issues in lead time, which may get stretched, which may get disrupted, and obviously resulting in your decommitments to your customers. I move on to the next one, smart warehouses, very close to heart. Now, we all love to have smart watches, smart TVs, smart mobiles, but it's high time we should have, and we are already having now, smart warehouses. And I'll get in a minute as to what those smart warehouses are. But just to let you know that we have fast growing past the stage where warehouse was considered like a go down or a four walls where you put in your stock. Warehouse today look with feel and stuff of things like these, and I'll spend a few minutes on what these are. On the left side, we've got stuff which are more robotic oriented. We've got already drones being used in supply chain, not just to supply or serve remote locations or places which are difficult to reach, but also in warehouses extensively for inventory counts. Now, inventory counts is something statutorily also required, and also important that you have a good control over it at all times. Now, if you got to shut your entire warehouse to do those counts in next 3 to 7 days, that goes non-productive. So here you have a solution. We've got drones which would just do your entire warehouse scanning in few minutes, if not minutes, few hours. And how it really helps us, it just goes on to make sure that you've got all your inventory scanned, almost 100% accurate. It's reliable and it's safe. And most of all, there is no downtime. We then come back to robotics, extensively used, high investment, but then extensively used in warehouses today because they hugely improve your productivity. They eliminate errors if there may be, and obviously they reduce the manual head count, effort, and resources that may be deployed. And of course, they give you consistent results in terms of what they are moving, where they are moving, what they are picking, packing, or shipping. Next one here is cobots. Now, cobots, as the name suggests, is collaborative robots, which means that you don't invest in an ultimate fully automatic robot, but you get into stuff which is partially a robot and partially being maneuvered by an operator. So that makes it a little cheaper, and that makes it human intelligence to also come in where it is required. So these are cobots which are extensively also used in robots to maneuver through aisles in warehouse and to pick pack. Effort job is done by the robot, but the intelligence job by operators. On the right side, we see stuff like auto sorters. You can, if you know any of the e-commerce players or very airports which are handling huge packages, this is a common sight. And that's because these are capable of handling thousands of parcels in a jiffy with accuracy like almost 100%, speed, things just move, no hand or human hand required, and it's obviously fully automated. Then there is bottom right, we have vertical lift modules. These are standard known storage modules where you feed in the screen below as to what part you need, and the part comes down and then you do the shipping part of it. Best utilized for where spaces are constrained and where you need to improve your productivity. But an advanced version of vertical lift is ASRS, often called ASRS, which actually is automated storage and retrieval system. This is to the extent that there is one guy who would be managing millions of parts at a press of button. And if AI is used, not even press of button, as soon as order drops, there is, if you can see the cursor, the big lift goes picks up a particular tot or a bin and brings it down to the shipping area. That's how it is. Hugely automated, but then very investment intensive. So we've got some of these in our warehouses, but these are like really making the turnaround time between pick, pack, ship very, very quick. Lastly, on this slide, we see something called 3D. Now, this is a technology which is gaining importance, where you can, instead of manufacturing a part, you can actually produce a part by actually manufacturing it via 3D technology. Extensively used more when you need not massive parts, but need end of life or some part once in a while. So it's not really feasible to put a production line or to invest on molds on it, but rather produce it as and when required by 3D technology. Now, all that and many more really contribute to your smart warehouse. Believe me, if you happen to visit one, your eye will be really eyes wide open, because these are really getting smarter by every passing day. I now get down to the next one, which is resilience. Now, this is a word, again, post-pandemic is most commonly used. And why? Because as organizations, as supply chain in particular, this was probably missing or not explored to the extent it should have. But thanks to the supply chain organizations, that they are building fast resilience in their supply chain entire end-to-end makeup to make sure that they are well prepared for future. And some of the stuff that happens is like these. The first one here is about visibility. Now, if you can track your with pizza or your burger while it's coming on the way to any of the fast food chain, why would you not expect your costly sales orders being tracked? And hence the customers are insisting that we really want a visibility of end-to-end supply chain. Where is my order? Is it in production? Is it in shipment? Is it in which part? Where is it, right? So this is not anymore optional for organizations to not have. And not just to improve customer experience, but also to improvise their own processes. It's hugely important that a visibility of their supply chain is as extensive as it should be. Next one, agility. Again, no matter how much you talk about it, but it's important that your entire supply chain should be flexible, that it responds to whether there is a demand change, there is a supply change, there is something in the environment that changes. How soon is your entire supply chain able to adapt and course correct accordingly? That's what agility of a good supply chain is. Diversification of supplier base, as simple as it says. I spoke about a China example. Now, if at all you are an organization which had only one supplier, which produces a component that goes in your bill of material, and this component comes from that part of Shanghai which has been closed for last 2 months, God only save. So it's important that you have got a supplier base which is diversified, which is in today's scenario not concentrated in a geography, or important that you don't work with monopolistic suppliers, you have more than one supplier, and the list goes on and on. What it helps is to just reduce your risks. Another thing that makes for your resilience is how well are you planned or prepared for contingencies. Contingencies again could be, you could never think of one supplier goes out of business, financially bankrupt, or God forbid, a natural disaster happens. Is there a backup supplier? We have long talked about, though I am never somebody who would suggest, but the word JIT or just in time has long been taught as very efficient, optimized way of working. And maybe some other day I can talk in detail of what are the, does it really help anyone? And these are the best times we realize that if you got to be fit, JIT might not be the best thing to do. Now, it's not best because you may just go stock out and your supply chain may collapse. There are customers waiting, there is demand, but you're not able to produce, or something happens somewhere which you were running so lean in your inventory that you actually collapse and you actually are not able to produce. Now, this morning I added something else in this contingency, which was this word cyber resilient. Now, this is becoming more and more critical in organizations because so much of what we do is over cloud, over network. So it's really important that we protect our network, our supply chain from cyber attacks. And this is no more a perceived, but it's a very, very dominant threat. And any explosion of data driven by organizations through digital tools is creating more and more vulnerability. But good thing is that as organizations are realizing it's important, they are shifting towards investing in firewalls and more employee trainings. Now, those trainings could be as simple as getting into fake phishing mails come in, and if an employee clicks, that means he didn't observe or read the mail properly, and he should go through some training. Now, I am not getting into chats. I see some chat stuff coming in, but we can take it in the end if those are questions. I next move on to digitalization. Now, again, interesting word, often misunderstood. What is actually digitalization, and how is it really different from digitization, right? So while digitization is really converting your stuff into your process into bits and bytes, digitalization is actually implementing that digitized process. That's how simply it is. And here are some of the ways by which it is done. Artificial intelligence, robotic process, automation, and some more of those. Now, what is artificial intelligence? You integrate your key people, processes, and systems and make some smart machines to solve your day-to-day problems or do your tasks. Now, some of that in supply chain could be use cases like network modeling or route planning of distribution or inventory management. And something which is not mentioned on this slide, which goes along with artificial intelligence, is your machine learning. What happens is that when you start to use artificial intelligence, it's important that there are new cases and new stuff happening in field. And there is your machine learning giving feedback to your intelligence to become more and more intelligent as they have more data along the way. We then come to robotic process automation. And these are what? These are again an attribute of your machine learning, which makes your process accurate, which makes your process repetitive, and with little or no human intervention. Then there is something called digital twin. Again, very, very interesting concept, because what it does in background is it creates a digital replica of your physical assets. A simple example could be cars these days come with your remote access. That means you can have your mobile to give you inputs that your car needs an engine oil change or a tire needs to be swapped. And we've got in our industry, our laptops also, or our products, which on a customer may tell you, you know what, your hard disk is not performing best, or you are using a incorrect probably charger, or you've got your motherboard which is got vulnerable. Some of these are even intelligent enough to give feedback to the customer support of the organization from which the product is brought. And hence, without you bothering about it, you'll have a customer service executive or a remotely supported executive helping out to make sure that your product health is really fine. Internet of Things, again, just used to make your life simple, secure, productive. In warehouse context, it's used more to drive safety and efficiency throughout warehouse, so that there are signals coming in to avoid collisions, to avoid any accidents in warehouse. And there are advanced ones which actually monitor the, like your Apple Health Band and all, which would give you signals that the guy is stressed or is in a drowsy mode post lunch. So it is not best that this guy should be driving a forklift. Here is how Internet of Things helps. Sustainability. There is too much to talk on sustainability, but I know you probably spend the whole day. So I'll go really, really quick on this one. But here are the things which in supply chain, it may sound repetitive, but right from design stage where you are introducing or thinking of introducing a product, you need to, in NPI stage itself, think of how sustainable you need to design a product. You then go on to source through suppliers which are having sustainable products which have little or no waste, are sending in packagings which are reusable, manufactured at places which are using least energy, more of natural light, and hence the best of what it should be. Distribution, again, it's important that these practices are conveyed to the supply chain distribution leg, where you are using network optimization or route maps or net zero kind of transport facilities, electric vehicles, etc., which make your distribution effective and sustainable. Reverse logistics, as in forward, your reverse logistics needs to be efficient. Product returned could be refurbished and resold, or refurbished, repaired, and something can be done about it. And that brings to the circular economy as one important stuff that we all talk about today, which makes sure that little or not anything should be waste. Here are some of the stuffs that we as our organization do. I will not dwell at all on this one, but just to say that more and more organizations today are having policies and tenets. And incidentally, in my introduction, Arya did talk about progress made real, which I lead globally by chance. And here is what we do about making sure that we have got our goals till 2025, 2030 and beyond on some of these. Now, all this, I know I've been going a little fast, but I would keep some time for our Q&A. So what happens is that we come to almost the end or the last part of our stuff, which is supply chain talent. Now, you talk to anybody in human resources and they'll tell you skilled employees are most important asset in an organization. And there is no monetary value that can be assigned to it. But you know, the generation that I am coming from, or decades ago, the way to get creative talent was only through experience. And it was even harder to attract and then reskill talent and then to retain those. So those stuff which was at one point of time difficult I would say, is now getting better, easy, and more available. It's still not in abundance. I must tell you, supply chain people like you who are in the making would be somebody who will be sought after. And that's because what was missing at that time was there were no institutes or organizations or places where you could so skill yourself. But here's the answer. You now are at a place, or you now have places where you can get supply chain talent going through syllabus which is designed, which is evolved, which is actually using day-to-day practical examples to make sure that everything works in the way it should. Now that actually was my last slide, and I hope I got the picture right, because I really want to applaud you all and congratulate you that you are at a right place where your supply chain talent would be honed and you would be ready for doing big stuff ahead. I now would get to a next one. I have a 1-minute interesting video. If I can start that. I hope the audio is there. It should be there. Just 1-minute video. It talks about how transformation is happening in organization. And it's a little old one, but particularly talks about how India is placed and makes us all proud.
So that was a lovely, lovely session. We really loved how you kind of encapsulated all the important concepts such as resilience, automation, diversification of supplier base, digitization, all of these important concepts into one. And we really loved how you beautifully took us through it all. So thank you for that lovely session, sir. I'll hand over to Ayush now to take up the Q&A bit.
Sure.
Thanks, Arya. We will now quickly take some questions from the audience, sir. Request people to raise their hands and we'll take it up one by one. So we have Akash. Akash, please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Sareen. Thank you for the insightful session. It was really wonderful, and especially the presentation, the images. It was a very interesting session. After spending a lot of time from morning, we were still engaged and were listening what you were telling about. Sir, one specific question. You mentioned that still the just-in-time approach is not may not be the right approach to solve the complex problems in inventory, which I found a bit, you can say, surprising also, because even the automotive industry and bit of FMCG industry still works on this model. where they feel that putting up a small warehouses either nearby my plant or maybe nearby my aftermarket warehouse, where I can collect all the material from suppliers and have a inventory of 10 to 15 days. Well, people are still, operating on this model. So do you feel there is a kind of a thumb rule, or maybe as a decision maker, when do you feel that no, JIT will not be the right answer for my solution and I should go with a different approach on it?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because, as I said, really close to heart. And specifically, you mentioned about automobile industry. And just listen carefully. And sometime, if you get an opportunity, speak to the supply chain manager of that automobile industry closest to you. Even when anybody says, I am using JIT, I have a warehouse next to or in my premises, and hence I will never be in a stock out situation. And that's ideal to assume and good to have. Now go a little deeper and ask, how does JIT really happens? JIT happens because you need to produce, say, 100 cars in a day, and you've told your suppliers to keep a stock of only 125 or close to 100 in the warehouse in your premises. And what happens in backend is that you've also told that we may need sometime 150 or 200, or you have to in your warehouse keep 1,000 plus stock because we may have demand variations. So what happens is that though optics wise, it may look like you're having just 100 of that component there, but backend that supplier has to maintain 1,000 plus inventory just to make sure it looks like JIT to you, because you have also got an agreement with him that you have to scale 10x times if required. Go a little deeper. How does he maintain that flexibility, agility in your supplies to cater to 10x requirement? He will say, okay, I will give you 100 each day. And if you want 1,000 flexibility, I want you to sign up in the contract that if you stop the model, if you don't need it, you're going to pay for not just what is in JIT, but also the stock that I hold. So here comes my answer to your question that, yeah, JIT, whenever it is there, and it will always be there, it is not something that will move out, but just go in detail to find out how JIT happens. Somebody somewhere has to pay for that 1,000 pieces also. And as a basic thumb rule, you might have learned in supply chain, there is no free lunch, and that somebody has to be the buyer. So the buyer will have either a liability or something built into the cost that he may say, I'll supply you 100 each day and don't ask me more than 100 ever, and I'll charge you $1 for it. But if you want me to have 1,000 in stock also, I might charge you $12, and I'll build the cost of that stock that I have in my warehouse also. So I can go on and on, but that's how a real JIT works. Respecting your knowledge and fact that, yeah, automobile works on it and it's very important, but this is how it actually works. Hope that answers.
Okay, we have Mona Lisa next. Mona Lisa, please go ahead.
Thank you for the session, Sarin sir. So my question to you would be, what is the secret to Dell's reliable supply chain success?
Well, there is no secret sauce. It's just that we have been evolving over time and a little bit ahead of time. If you go and look at history of Dell, it started in 1984 in a garage with $1,000 by Michael Dell. And the only concept which was at that point of time transformational was that it offered its customers that you can build your own configuration. You can, not just that, as soon as internet kicked in, it also gave visibility to customers to see that where your PC is it being manufactured, is in distribution, reaching you, when, where, what, everything. So not much in terms of any secrecy, but it's just that we've tried to evolve over time and not be extinct. So we are in business still.
Okay, next question we have from Saurabh. Saurabh, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Ayush. And thanks, sir. It was a very brief and very poignant presentation, which I'll say. My question is twofold in terms, one is regarding resistance. Like we all talk about resiliency, which is of course the need of the hour, given the pandemic situation and all. But it takes a lot of finances to actually be resilient. So not all companies are meant to be resilient in the wake of very sudden push, which is pandemic. So for those companies who are not able to do so in the given amount of time, how can they survive in these situations? Can they be resistant for some time and then bear the wave, bear the push, and meanwhile they apply this agility and the resilience framework?
Yeah, so I mean, there isn't, while anybody, a bigger organization may be a little better prepared and a smaller one may be a little less, but they've all got their risk-taking capabilities, which are built up in their business models. So I wouldn't say that they are less prepared, but things like what we've just gone through are not any bigger or smaller organization matters. Everybody went through similar amount of challenges, risks, and they've all mostly gone past, learned, and evolved or emerged as probably more stronger.
All right. Thank you, sir. Next, we have Niharika. Niharika, please go ahead with your question.
Good evening, sir. First of all, I would like to thank you for such an engaging session. So my question to you is that what are the current transformations that Dell is making to stay competitive?
Well, there are a whole host of them. We are doing a lot of stuff in our products, right from a simple laptop to storage, servers. You may know that stock exchange in India runs on Dell servers. So is some of the major banks also. So we are diversifying in terms of our products, and that's transformation. We are also trying to offer end-to-end solutions to our customers, whether it is in IT infrastructure or financing and payments, or even services like consulting and management. So we are like trying to see that what customer may need tomorrow and can we offer it just today ahead of some of our competition.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Nikita.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for such a great session so far. So I have a quick question here. My question is, how can supply chain analytics transform business?
Well, I'll have to go a few slides back. So analytics has got ample data, and it's up to an organization as to how you may use it. You can use it like some of the examples talked about: improve working capital, reduce lead time, improve payment terms, make your product visible to the customer in the journey of their availability, do modeling in terms of what happens if there is a seasonality, monsoon kicks in today, and there would be floods in Mumbai. So how do we really take care of a product which may be required more or less in a season? So you've got ample data which erstwhile was not utilized, not getting utilized, which now via the models and the simulation with those models available, we can actually take a lot of those scenarios into consideration and make ourselves ready. with those analytics.
All right. Sir, in the paucity of time, we'll be taking the rest of the questions offline. I would like to extend the vote of thanks before we close the session. Thank you for a wonderful session, sir. We all are taking away a lot of insights that we saw in your presentation from the very essence of why organizations need to transform their supply chains or they will become extinct, to various transformation techniques that can be adopted, such as advanced analytics, digitalization, and smart warehouses. I'm sure, sir, all of these learnings will help us become better leaders in terms of decision making with respect to supply chain transformation and sustainability. Once again, thank you, Yogesh, sir, for taking out time to join and enlighten us today. Sir, we hope to have you again for future discussions at XLRI Jamshedpur.
Thank you, Ayush, and thank you all of you to not just be patiently listening, but I love the curious questions that came in. Not sure, did I live up to the standards that you were expecting, but I humbly thank you for patiently listening to me, especially as somebody said, you've been there in the session since morning. I know it is taxing, but then, you know, I'm a cricket lover myself. In next 1 hour or so, we'll have some good stuff to watch. I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the evening. And thanks once again for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. So before we begin with the next session, which starts at 7:15, XLRI XPGDM case competition team would now be announcing the supply chain case competition results. May I please request Swaroop and Ayush from the team to take it up further.
Thank you, Ayush. Can you confirm if I'm audible?
Your voice is feeble, Swaroop. Can you speak louder?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. And on behalf of the competition committee, I'll be declaring the results of the ClockSpeed case competition that we had. So it started a month back.
Swaroop, sorry to interrupt. It's still feeble. Not able to hear you.
Hello.
Can you try speaking louder?
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
So we started a month back, and so we had more than 900 teams who registered for this competition, and we had close to 200 submissions. And out of that, we selected 10 teams that went shortlisted in the first round, and we are here to announce the top 3 teams. I'll just be sharing my slide. Just a minute. So the second runner-up is the Team Revolution from SC Machadi, Pune. So a big congratulations to Varun and team. And the first runner-ups are the A team from IIM Calcutta. So congratulations, Arithra and team. And the winners finally are Team Wabi Sabi from ISB Hyderabad. So congratulations, Radhika and team, for making it to the top of the ladder. And best of luck to all other teams that participated, and congratulations to the teams who won this competition again. That's all from our side, and we will take a short break right now, and we will come back at 7:15 for the next session. Thank you.
A big congratulations to all teams. We would resume back in the next 15 minutes. So you could stay logged in, and we'll see you at 7:15.
At XLRI, we have the finest pool of professors who come from the best institutes across the world. They also offer a plethora of electives tailored to suit the academic distinctiveness of the institute. Cutting-edge pedagogy, complementing the latest industry trends.
At XLRI, we prefer learning by doing.
The journey at Excel proved to be life-changing since it provided me a winning mix of career advancement, unparalleled network, and the opportunity to constantly be surrounded by people who challenge you for the better.
Recreational and energizing.
Here at XLRI, we live by the motto excellence and integrity.
XLRI ExPGDM program facilitates peer-to-peer learning for people coming from various backgrounds. Even in my study group, I have people coming from various backgrounds like hospitality, merchant navy, automobile, and I come from consulting background.
Developing critical thinking and enhancing leadership skills.
Exhilarating and enriching 12 months experience.
At XLRI ExPGDM, we learn and prepare for the greater good of the society.
Challenging the status quo.
Driving personal and professional transformation.
At XLRI, we are nurtured to be responsible leaders for tomorrow.
education framework. At XLRI, we focus on a management education framework that is integrative and offers students an opportunity to develop and pursue new ideas at the same time. We constantly evolve our curriculum in line with changing economic and social landscapes. Besides the flagship programs, XLRI has added many new executive and certificate programs over the years to meet the growing demand of various industry sectors. Our virtual interactive learning program and entrepreneurship programs are our two key offerings.
Learning at XLRI is different from the way learning happens elsewhere. One reason is because of the use of cases. We use cases to relate academic concepts with industry application.
Two dimensions that I would talk about: sustainability of our leadership, our journey in our leadership, sustainability of our careers is dependent on ethics.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another enriching session organized as part of ClockSpeed 2.0. I would like to take this responsibility of introducing the next speaker for our session. It is Mr. Darryl Watkins. Darryl Watkins is a Senior Director for Consulting Services at GEP Worldwide. Darryl, sir, has more than 24 years of industry and consulting experience, having supported a wide variety of clients in the chemicals, manufacturing and contract manufacturing, utilities, and retail spaces. He has worked with suppliers and clients in Europe, Asia, Central America, and throughout North America. Further, sir takes pride in elevating the knowledge within the client teams and has led many strategic sourcing and negotiation training courses to do just that. He has worked with firms such as A.T. Kearney, FTI, and Mainpoint, wherein he specializes in large-scale transformation projects. And he has deep expertise in facilities management transformation, along with real estate optimization. Sir would be addressing us today on the topic, Unlocking ESG within Supply Chain. Welcome, sir. Delighted to have you, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I know it's been a long day for you all, so I appreciate you.
Sir, you're not audible.
Okay.
Okay.
It shows on my end that I'm audible. Can you hear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for having me. I know it's been a long day for you all, and you all are at the latter parts of it, but I appreciate you hanging in there and listening to my session here on ESG and supply chain. So I'll share my screen here and we'll get started with this overall session. Just want to make sure my screen is visible there.
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay, so a bit of introduction there already for me. Thank you, Anam. So I won't go into too much more of that in terms of that. Just happy to be here today and speak with you all on a few topics as it pertains to ESG. So first and foremost, we'll go into a little bit of an overview of ESG, just giving a little bit of the grounding and the framework there. We'll talk a little bit about some of the regulatory requirements. Things are really changing quite a bit across the world when it comes to governance and some of the aspects of what are being required across various countries. Also, we'll talk a little about the ESG maturity and framework, and then what I'll leave you with is just a case study as we address some more of the questions and answers that may come up in this session overall. Okay, so with that, let's get into it. As we talk a little bit about ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, there's a perspective of that that gives you a kind of an understanding. What does that really mean? What are organizations really doing to try to change this aspect of it? Many of the things that you're thinking about with sustainability come from mostly the environmental space. So when you look at it from a standpoint of what do clients, what do companies overall look for in this area of sustainability? And it's addressing a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions. So you'll see the sustainability reports, a lot of the things that go on there in those reports will address the environmental. How are we overall just taking care of the environment going forward? Eliminating pollution, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, overall understanding climate change. Those aspects of that are driven through the environmental side of that, and unlocking that with, by understanding how to decarbonize your organization and various things. That's all going to be done under the environmental piece. And then the governance side of it is really what we're going to be doing to focus on that enforcement. So when you have shareholder buy-in, when you have the overall understanding of how do you receive that pressure from your leadership, from the executive board, for private companies, even just their branding and their overall labeling, that comes from the governance side of that. Well, some of the parts that aren't necessarily focused on as much when you look at some of the sustainability reports and many of the areas of address when it comes to ESG is the social side of it, which is very important. Now, it's not saying that companies don't participate in this side of it. It's not reported as much and it's not touted as much. So when you go through things around just overall understanding how they had a response to even the pandemic and what happened in there, really when it comes to human rights and supplier diversity, these are areas that are very important to the ESG overall, just sustainability opportunities, but we want to make sure that we also give credence to some of the aspects that are important in the social space there. Okay, so at GEP, we have a perspective of what this looks like as well. And so just giving you an understanding of what we have and when we talk about this particular area of ESG as well. We've also added a portion of that to address the economic side of this. So when you look at it from an environmental standpoint, we've heard about greenhouse gas emissions, what happens there, how to have a target towards being net zero overall on your emissions. And those are goals people are targeting. You see 20, 30, 40, 50 type of targets out there for a lot of the decarbonization and getting to a point of net zero. That's very important for a lot of organizations. So it's really, keeping that focus there is very important that we continue to do that. And the other side of that is the social side. When we're looking at, we're partnering with certain companies that can help us identify supply base for our clients that have diverse needs, or we're helping out minority and small-owned businesses from that standpoint. It's giving them that overall platform to just be able to perform at a level that is equal to those that are in a more established, more mature business space in their industry. So it gives credence to those small businesses and helps them with that as well. And the governance side of it is just, again, driving those, just the sustainability strategy and putting things in place that are going to overall help support this ecosystem of ESG. One of the topics that's not often considered when we talk about that, and let's looking at the economic side of that. And that's the piece that we've added at GEP as well in terms of talking to the ESG environment. And that side is, again, understanding these factors when it comes to ESG can help drive additional value to an organization. A lot of that comes through brand recognition in terms of the things that they're doing now to address climate change, to address those social injustices and a lot of the things that happen around the world today. We're in a very troubled times when it comes to just not only the pandemic and then the political unrest and then, seeing unprecedented inflation as well. So a lot of things right now help with that branding overall when companies are taking the initiative to take a frontline approach to some of these particular efforts. Okay. So when we look at this, what do metrics look like when we talk about these overall? I mean, what does it mean when we talk about ESG and how are some of these measured? So looking at it just from, again, the size that we mentioned, I feel it's very important to focus on some of the social side of this as well as the environmental. So as we're going through this, we'll look at this equally as we're talking through that. And so some of the metrics that come about is truly measuring supplier diversity. So what does it mean when we have an opportunity to look at supplier diversity and understand that? And that's driving a participation into your supplier network for small and disadvantaged businesses, usually associated by a government class of protected class of minority businesses or small business in that regard. And that's what we mean when we refer to supplier diversity. And those small business partnerships, it really helps drive an opportunity to get small businesses just a seat at the table for some of the opportunities that only larger, more mature organizations have been exposed to. Human rights is something that is always should be top of mind when we're talking about organizations and the things that they're doing to protecting their brand and their reputation, but also supporting veteran-owned businesses and local businesses as well. A lot of those opportunities, when you see those areas of disadvantage, we don't think about the veterans or local businesses as part of that small business community. We always go to the branding of minority businesses, but veterans coming back from those tours and various things have a big disadvantage. And so giving them a platform to be able to do that is helpful as well. A lot of the things that we'll see when it comes to sustainability reports and the overall understanding of what's happening when it comes to the environmental approach are measured here. I mean, you'll see the greenhouse gas emissions and the calculations that come about to help understand what your emissions look like, and then working towards a net zero type of approach. Those are going to be a little bit more common. We see the energy efficiencies and some of the things. And when you talk about waste, just diversion programs, recycling is good, but the diversion and just having elimination from waste going to the landfill is really going to help the environment in that regard. So we focus on programs that are looking that way. So now what's your percentage of waste that is being diverted? So looking at those type opportunities are driving scenarios there as well. And what really is not measured as much, and when you talk about the economic side of it, in ESG, this part is not really as focused, and that's why GEP has made it a point to bring economic side of it back into there. So understanding the cost savings and the overall margin improvement that are generated by having these type of programs and measuring the social and environmental side, a lot of that informs and drives the economic side of this as well. So that's a point that we have to keep in consideration. And when you think about not only employee performance, but also employee satisfaction, when you have an employee base or a company base that's truly focused on improving their overall commitment to the environment, their commitment to social change, that has a sense of pride for the employee base. And it brings about an area of opportunity now for them to feel special about the organization that they work for. And that helps with some of the overall just morale and retention. We've seen a lot of folks in this great resignation leave companies for many different reasons. And they want to know that their companies are committed to these things that are important to them. A lot of that is driven by social and environmental change. So those are some things that we just have to keep in mind as we're continuing to approach this space and to continue to grow as it pertains to ESG. Okay, and we look at this, and I know it's maybe overwhelming to take all this in, but this just gives you the level of importance, not just in the US, but globally as it pertains to carbon neutrality and the overall change. We have a lot of the COP26 leaders you'll see there that's their 26th conference overall, and having a lot of the deforestation even by 2030, ending that, taking out trees and really eliminating that. Trees clean the air, and a lot of that is very helpful. You have, President Biden in the US, you have those opportunities where they're saying try carbon neutrality for the government by 2050. So you'll see a lot of these measures, 2030, 2040, 2050, when it comes to a lot of the operations. And that's important to understand those targets that these companies have, is knowing that it takes quite a bit of time to get these type opportunities in place and for them truly to take root and impact. And you have some of your world's largest companies like Apple committing to no child labor. That's taking on the social side of that. And you have scope 3 emissions. We'll get into a little bit of that later in terms of explaining just the difference between scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. But then also looking at the growth in chief sustainability officers over the last 10 years, 228%. That just shows you the level of focus that companies are having when it comes to sustainability and what's happening with these particular areas. And so you have JP Morgan here, another in the financial industry, committing themselves to Black and Hispanic businesses. That's on the social side and addressing that as well. So you have this overall commitment from not just companies, but regulatory agencies like the SEC and others that are driving this overall commitment to sustainability and to eliminate carbon and methane use and the greenhouse gas emissions. Even you have airports like O'Hare, which is out of Chicago in the US, that is focused on it as well. So one of the larger polluters, obviously with airplanes, still having that pledge to get to some form of carbon neutrality and to have an impact by using fuels that are more sustainable. So there's companies worldwide that are taking this charge very serious and putting their efforts in place and backing this up with their, not only just comments and statements, but with their contributions financially to help these matters as well. So really a lot of attention is being paid to this, and it's something that's going to necessary for us to have a sustainable world going forward. And you say, what does good look like and what is its overall? These are just a couple of examples under each of those aspects in terms of just increasing the maturity for a company. Whether you have someone that's committing to no child labor, no slavery usage in their overall solutions that they're developed, or you're looking at just reducing the cost of doing business for startups. That's that, again, how do you give back to organizations that are still trying to grow, small business, minority businesses? Those are all businesses that are going to need that boost, that extra edge to get a leg up a little bit. And here's a program for social inclusion overall. That's important. All these are important matters. And you see companies that are taking place here and starting to bring that attention. So when we talk about what does good look like under the environmental standpoint, you have a chance to really address some of the carbon neutrality, reducing their carbon footprint by 12%. You have the monetary commitment there, and that's through electricity and other parts of savings. Going towards electrical plans for their vehicles. That's important as well. That's you'll see a lot of not only government agencies, but a lot of companies pushing them towards their service vehicles being electric-based vehicles. And then we have over here the decarbonization opportunities to reduce CO2 emissions and overall reduction there. And then for some of the circular aspects of that, the circular economy in this aspect, think of circular as a point just of recycling. So if you have a product used for one thing, it's not then just discarded. You're able to keep that into the overall the streams to eliminate waste. That's part of the diversion programs as well. So if you can have a circular supply base, you have an opportunity to reduce waste and those overall just trash going to the landfills. So these just gives you a few examples of what it looks like from just the maturing aspect of looking at these areas of social, environmental, and circular references when it comes to ESG. I mentioned scope 3 emissions earlier, and I said we'd get into a little bit here to talk about that. And this is really what it comes down to. You'll hear a lot about where companies are focused on scope 3 emissions and reducing that. And what that means is those are the upstream and downstream results of their overall carbon contribution. So when you look at that, that's what it really is referring to. So scope 1 emissions are going to be what you have direct control over in terms of just your usage from operating your space and building. Scope 2 is going to be the aspects of what you purchase. It's the electricity you consume, the gas you consume from that side of it. Then scope 3 is going to be the byproduct of all of those other things. So as a consulting firm, we have employees that travel to visit our clients. That's going to be part of their scope 3 emissions. So when we think about that, how can we travel less? How can we utilize technology and video? That helps overall with our scope 3 maintenance of that and the contribution. So when employees are commuting back and forth to work, that's part of your scope 3 overall emissions that you're having there. So that's what it kind of means when you are talking about scope 1, 2, and 3 type of emissions. So that'll give you the little bit of variation and understanding of what that means when you hear that terminology. And the focus on the downstream and upstream scope 3 side of it is because that's really what a lot of a company can do to control. You still have to operate a building. You still have to keep it warm. You still have to keep electricity going. So those are a little bit more challenge. You still have demand management levers that you can utilize for those as well. You know, having lights that dim or go out when people are not in the room, having escalators or, you know, on a low power mode until somebody actually needs to utilize them. Those are all demand management features that you can manage and control with scope 2 emissions. And so those are inside and internal to the building, but then the overall aspects that are external is a lot of what you have for in scope 3. And it's why many of the companies will comment on those and talk about how we can reduce and keep that in control. Okay. So then as we look at just the progression of, you know, that it's like, okay, I want to get started with this. You know, we want to get started. We want to develop a program. We want to have some things in place that allow us to overall get our company going, get our organization going, our school, whatever that may be. This just gives you that progression of having a starter stage and then getting down into best in class. And when you really think about it, even those that are talking about best in class still only have 28% of their emission plan in place. So when you look at that, this is still a large effort that has to come about. So if you're not started yet, if you haven't gotten started yet, don't think that you are so far behind that you can't get started. It's still a progressive area that we have to get into and continue to grow for, because this is something that is not an easy plan. It's not an overnight plan. You'll see a lot of the common things here of reporting and measuring scope 3 emissions. That's common to where you're going to see across these programs overall. And when you get to some of the best in class programs and you talk about companies that are truly committed to this ESG journey, you will have them pushing that downstream into their suppliers as well. So with their supplier relationship management programs, they're going to address ESG elements of that with their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. So that's going to be when you have that level of commitment overall, when you're forcing or at least pushing that commitment downstream to your suppliers as well. It's not good enough just to have your own house in order, but you're helping push the envelope when you're engaging your suppliers and those that are downstream from you as well. And it's upping their ability to have accountable measures as it pertains to managing the greenhouse gas emissions and really contributing to this holistically. So we want to make sure that we're not just the only ones responsible and putting blinders on when it comes to this, but it's also helping those suppliers upstream and downstream from where we are. So our clients, our suppliers, those that outreach is there as well. That's beneficial for these type efforts. Okay, so GP, our offering when it comes to ESG and supporting that, because we have a recognition of this, we have to do, just as I was saying, we have to have outreach to help bridge this and bring it to bear for some of our clients as well. And a lot of this can just start with a materiality assessment, you know, bringing this into play to where we're actually bringing visibility and tracking and a level of analytics to our clients that's helping them to understand where they are today. You know, what are your overall emissions? What are you doing? What are you going to do to now drive towards net zero? What does that time frame look like? You know, how are we going to overall come about with a decarbonization plan? How are we going to work on reducing your greenhouse gas emissions? All that has to start with the understanding of baseline. So getting that materiality assessment and understanding the baseline for where we are today is going to be the first step to then addressing how do we put some of these targets and these goals in place, and looking at the social side of it as well, and understanding, you know, eliminating anti-corruption type of situations and understanding the risk when it comes to human rights and what's happening with a lot of the labor pools there. So we want to make sure that our overall diversity programs are there with our clients as well, where they're having supplier diversity efforts and goals and bringing that level of cybersecurity in place as well that protects all of that and buttons it all up. The governance is going to be what surrounds that, so we don't really have the same way that's going to be integrated across all measures here. So you have a kind of a covering of governance when it comes to this side of it. And then the circulatory, when we talked about that earlier, a little bit of that comes from the, having the circular supplies where you're now not just discarding things and have that go into the landfill. You want to be able to try to extend the life span of your products in as much as possible in that space where you're having opportunities to do so. So that's going to help in that regard, again, with the diversion and eliminating of waste in our landfills. And that helps just, one, it's when you have these overall circular type of opportunities, it does help with your economic structure for the business as well. So it has mutual benefit, not just from the environment, but also to the bottom line of our clients and many of the folks there. So that helps with that overall generation, setting the plan up, helping them to understand the value of this, the value in branding, the value in the economic contribution, because that's also what many of our stakeholders from the client side are going to be concerned about and want to better have an awareness for. Okay, so a lot of the questions we have when it comes to this is what can procurement really do when it comes to driving ESG, and how can they contribute to helping this for the business? Procurement has a significant function when it comes to ESG because we are integrated into the supply base when it comes to that. So when we have supplier relationship management meetings, we're developing KPIs, key performance indicators that are going to determine how that's engagement with our supply base exists. So setting that strategy up early on, helping them through market intelligence, insights, and other aspects, having our SME support that we have from an ESG standpoint really to drive that. That's where procurement gets engaged early and can really drive the strategy for that. And then from the sourcing execution, that's really helping to understand what those measurements are that we're having questions as part of our RFPs, and our go-to-market strategy is going to have specific questions to address ESG opportunities and to help them understand our commitment to ESG, meaning from the client standpoint. So helping them to recognize that, how does that economic value still get incorporated into that? And then when you go to the contracting phase of that, ensuring that those KPIs and SLAs are associated with ESG. So we're targeting that, we're having specific measures. You want to inspect what you expect. So having those measures overall to really drive that performance and ensure that our clients and suppliers are aligned with what they're supposed to be doing. So they have a clear understanding of what those ESG goals are. We're tracking those quarterly or whatever the cycle needs to be to ensure that that's going to be making the progress that needs to happen. And if it's not happening to the way that we expect, then we have to have the prowess to be able to stop purchasing from those particular suppliers that are not meeting the standards that we have. Just if there was in an organization where you had quality standards, those quality standards, if a company can't meet those, we would stop purchasing from them. So we may need to get to that point to where we're having that same level of commitment as it pertains to our ESG standards and ensuring that the progress is properly being made to make the strides overall towards reaching the goals. Because if we don't drive that through our supply base and hold them accountable, then you're not going to get that push and that continuous drive to get to a level of this growth and expansion when it comes to developing and sustaining these ESG programs. All right, so while we wind down just the framework, and then we'll have a case study and while we take some questions, but I just wanted to get an understanding here of the overall framework when it comes to ESG and having some of the aspects identified and in place. So you have to deliver those operational efficiencies and understand that piece of it. You know, the decarbonization, looking at how we manage utilities and the consumption of those, that's always top of mind and a big portion of the ESG aspects of that. And then understanding how do we promote sustainability broadly, you know, having these overall success factors that are part of the process that we have through sourcing and the contributions with procurement and the overall supply chain. Those are aspects of that come together. But just as within the supply chain, you have the logistics and warehousing side of it that have to come into play, being a little bit more efficient with your lane development and the overall aspects and usage for your warehousing. How do we manage that more overall? That's going to be important. And then naturally controlling the greenhouse gas emissions and how do we remove that from our contribution. But the people and the technology are going to underpin all of these efforts when you're developing and bringing together your overall efforts to ESG and the supply chain. Okay, so I'll land here on a case study just to help you, let you digest that. We had a couple of questions I know come through early on, and so I'll start addressing some of those questions, and then hopefully as we get through with just reading through the case study here and digesting some of that, we'll address a couple of questions, and then if there's more through the chat and other opportunities, we'll have a chance to just talk those either live or we'll address those later if we're running short on time. Okay, so let me just start with one of the questions that was presented earlier. And the question is, read the question, then kind of talk through my response to that. And it's, how can ESG elevate your supply chain? And I thought this was really an insightful question, because that's one of the things that really, when it comes to bear, folks want to understand why. Why do I need to do this? You know, what is in it for me when it comes to me and my business? And, you know, when you think about the supply chain and how it's uniquely positioned to operationalize the ESG agenda, it is very well positioned end to end. We talked about some of the framework on the previous page and some of that, but you have a path to reach those. We talked about 2030, 2040, 2050 goals. I mean, those are lofty targets. And so having those targets out to 2050, it requires the total value chain to be involved. You can't just have a portion of the supply chain contributing and not overall get to those contributions throughout the supply chain to get to the 2050 type targets. And so an approach that transforms both internal operations and supplier operations, as we mentioned, you have to have it downstream as well. That's going to help companies overall adopt this approach and really boost their supply chains. And they are developing some resilience to risk as well when they're addressing these and having that in place. So they'll be more prepared to manage the regulations. We saw some of the regulatory challenges that are coming forward. So as you go through these opportunities with ESG, you're preparing your company holistically to be competitive and to take advantage of some of these opportunities through the regulation to increase brand loyalty. We have opportunities just to change the dynamic of your brand and increase that overall awareness and brand loyalty because of the commitments to the environmental and social aspects that are there. Okay, so another question was, what are the short-term and long-term ESG goals for an organization? And this varies quite a bit, but it is a good way to position that questioning. And so in the short term, I think you'll find that most companies are focused on just compliance and risk mitigation, making sure that they are, you know, making targets, making strides towards those overall compliance targets that are coming down the pipe from the government's agencies. And so particularly organizations are going to be working to gain visibility required to facilitate proper disclosure and reporting. So that's going to be an area of that. So how do we properly understand where our baseline is and how do we report on that? When you have sustainability reports that you've traditionally published, you know, they're going to be reading those. Stakeholders and investors are going to be reading those and then holding you accountable to some of the things that you're discussing. So we have to have that. And there's a plethora of reporting frameworks and sustainability scoring systems. And so companies have to understand and learn what's really the best for them to navigate this space and how do they go about utilizing that and what's material for their business versus someone else's business. So you have to have those overall goals as we talk about setting targets for 2030, 2040, 2050. We have to develop a carbon disclosure strategy and have that in place. And those scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, and how do we overall include that into our discussion point, helping to report first of all on it so it's clear in terms of what those emissions are, but then how we're going to manage that. And some of the long-term strategies will come into place as focusing on how they can transform their business into a low carbon economy. Then that's ultimately going to be the long-term goal, is how can we get to a carbon neutral or net zero type of positioning for our businesses. And that's something that's going to be extremely important, not just for brand recognition, but for the environment and for the long-term survival of the planet. Okay, so we had a couple more questions that came through, I think 3 here. So I'll address these and then we'll pass it back to the team to guide through the rest of the questionings that came through with the chat or anything else that we had live. So another question, how do we have ESG goals of an organization changed since the post-pandemic? So something that we really have to think about through this. The pandemic has changed a lot in terms of the way we go about addressing just the nature of this aspect of ESG. So one of the things that we've witnessed through the pandemic is increased employee voice. And I talked about that a little bit earlier with the Great Resignation and having a sense of pride. But employees want to know that their companies believe in what they believe in. And so when you have that, companies have to recognize that, you know, retention is related to some of that overall employee satisfaction and that commitment, showing that their company has a greater purpose than just profits. And while that is the core of the business, we have to run the business to be profitable. They want to know that the business cares about more than just that. So having organizations to understand that and leveraging their ESG reporting to attract and recruit new talent. I mean, that's going to be something that's very important, putting that at the forefront that says, this is something that we can be focused on. This is something that we can be aligned on. And that helps overall with not only the focus of just how they've come out through the pandemic, but looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion aspects of that into the supply chain as well, and supporting those diverse suppliers and some of the aspects of those disadvantaged suppliers as well. But in COVID, you saw just an overall further exposure from the racial and economic disparities, and companies have taken now a voice and pushed towards that. So you see some of the dollars for social change and their commitment that way and what they've done. So many of the things that we have seen evolve from that, also including a lot of the robust policies as it comes to ethics in the supply chain, and including supplier diversity and impact sourcing. Those are many things that have historically not necessarily been a focus, but not only through the pandemic, but the combination of things that occurred within the pandemic and that time with a lot of these social issues that also, I think, takes a place there. And so another question was, how does ESG influence the interests of stakeholders in an organization? And that's something that's you have to keep top of mind, because when you're trying to make a push for change, you have to bring the organization along with you. And knowing that you can't be a solo in this effort, it has to be a company-wide aspect of that. And ESG impacts, you know, every business within the organization. So it's not just supply chain, it's not just procurement, those sides of the business. It really has more of a broader span and reach. And so our perspective for that is that the supply chain and procurement can and form this link with the business and really be a driver and an overall partner in this drive for ESG change and driving the requirements, as we mentioned earlier, being accountable to the supply base downstream and some of those aspects of it. So that's how we would see, you know, that overall influence taking place a bit there as well. There was another question on metrics, but I think we did address that with one of the slides we had here. So if you think about the metrics that we're associated with, you see some of the challenges, or at least some of the areas where you have to be improving upon in order to drive that. So we'll see some of the metrics that are contributed here as well. So I think that should address that question also. So no, we were parked on the case study, so just leaving that there for digestion. But that's what I had to speak about today, and I hope that was beneficial. We'll pass it to the host team here to address any of the other questions that may have come through. Let me see here some of the chat. We can grab those.
Hi, Daryl. I'm really sorry I was not able to unmute myself. So I'm the co-host for today. And firstly, thank you so much for taking those extra questions that were shared with you. Those were really insightful. But I'm pretty sure our folks would be having a few more questions. So guys, if we have a few more questions for Daryl.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we have a few hands in here.
Hi, Darren. So, yeah, thanks, Lakshya. So, I have a question around different demands from different countries. Something like India, which is looking at a higher adoption of EV, but you're not seeing the demand being met. So, although there is a will to change, to global climate, negatives that are happening. What are the top three objectives India should set in terms of ESG to meet global objectives as well?
Yes, yes. So, and that's, again, it starts with kind of the regulations that we were speaking of and some of the aspects for change there. So when you think about, what can be done is one, initially understanding where the first is the baseline. So the first thing first is to understand where we are today. What are our emissions looking like today? And then it's how can we set a strategy and a goal and put that in place towards lowering and minimizing those emissions long term. And so first of all, identify what the baseline is. Second, set the strategy and the goal. And then third would be to enforce that by setting those interim targets, setting measuring targets, holding that accountability factor to where we are truly understanding what's happening within the space. So I would say those would be the top three, or at least the first things to focus on to really drive that level of commitment. Did that address your question?
I think that's fine, Daryl. So Vineet, if you can go ahead.
Hi, Daryl. Good morning. I hope I am audible.
Yes, I can hear you.
So my question would be around the materiality assessment you talked about. I was just wondering whether it's just analytics or a quantitative assessment, and if yes, what are the different checks you have so that the raw data provided by your clients are not manipulated for their own benefits? Because considering this would be a brand risk for your product also.
Yeah, no, fair point, fair point. So as part of that is it's both, it's quantitative and it's qualitative when you're going through. So it involves the interview across the organization, having an understanding of the questioning and the process there to really dive into that. But that data is then collected on our side through the, it's not that we, it's collected, the data is collected holistically. So then it's performed the analytics on it that way. So it's not allowing them to have a self-reporting. They don't know what that aspect looks like. So it's more handing over the data and then us analyzing the data that is received. And based on, just having a lot of these opportunities, you kind of have a sense of where the numbers should be. So if they're taking out utilization numbers, you'll know something's missing, right? So you'll have a sense for those gaps, and then you can address those through further questions. And if two aren't lining up through the interview stage and then the analytics phase, with some level of gamesmanship is going on there. Great, thank you. Thanks for the question.
Priyanka?
See many hands up, so we have sounds like a few questions. So happy to address those.
Sorry, Daryl, if we can just take a few questions more, if you're comfortable.
Hi,
yes,
Daryl.
please.
Hi, Daryl. Thanks for your time. Hello. So my question is, what role can the latest technology play in achieving ESG goals in the supply chain?
Yeah, so technology is always an enabler that we have to do, similar to the previous question and looking at materiality assessments and some of those aspects of it. We take it from that standpoint that, the analytics and the artificial intelligence that can be gathered to understand and really capture in and bring in that level of data. But even when you think about technology, we talk about often, we go to the mode of, deep technology with AI and, market intelligence and things there. But even you're looking at technology, when we talk about social media, leveraging some of that side of it as well, it helps with brand recognition. It helps understand what other people are doing out there and really brings that home to where it's not seeming like you're in this struggle together or that it's a lofty goal. It's really truly understanding everybody's struggle and everybody's efforts to address ESG holistically. And so those can give ideas and opportunities through even social media and some of the aspects about that. It doesn't have to always be this deep technology from that standpoint to where we're talking about analytics and true low code or anything around that standpoint. Okay, we have more questions, or don't know what the timing was, so you'll have to keep me straight.
I think we can just take one more question. So Pulkit, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, and if there's more questions that we don't get to, if you put them in the chat, hopefully we can capture all of those, and I'll make sure we get a response that way. Did we have time for one more, or we were?
So Pulkit, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, actually, I wasn't able to unmute due to some distractions there. So firstly, Daryl, thank you so much for taking the session. It was highly enriching today. So my question is that we definitely realize that how important ESG factors are in the supply chain today. But how do we really go about shifting the focus of decision makers from in any organization from shareholder profit to stakeholder profit?
Yeah, so stakeholders, you mean internally?
Sorry?
You said stakeholder profit. So I'm just saying, you're talking about internal stakeholders, or how would you describe stakeholder profit? I just wanted to make sure.
It would include both the internal as well as external stakeholders.
Yeah, so when we talk about, and that's one of the things that we talk about, that economic value, right? And what really drives from that standpoint. So the overall aspects of the value we think about for a business, and when it changes to ESG, is looking at the overall investor and the investor profits and some of that side of it. So when you have the boardroom talking to you about ESG and those different things, thus naturally their focus is going to be on the aspects of the business when it comes to profitability. But then, as we talked about, some of the brand recognition and the things that from I call it employee satisfaction, those are aspects of it as well. Truly understanding that a company's commitment to change overall from an environmental and a social standpoint goes beyond profits. It gives that employee satisfaction. It helps retention. So when you talk about retention, that's less training that you have to have for new employees coming on. You keeping your tribal knowledge in place. So you're having an ability now to maintain a stable overall company base, which is valuable in and of itself, because now you're operating at a more efficient clip. Now that helps margins as well. So that's overall aspects of that. If you maintain retention and you don't have to train new employees, you don't have to spend money recruiting new employees, that helps the overall margin for the business, which drives profits long term as well. So it's intertwined both ways, and it really helps. One helps the other in terms of that.
Great, thank you, sir.
Great, thank you all.
So Daryl, just before everyone leaves, so thank you so much for this insightful session, Daryl. We always knew that how much these three external factors had to be considered whenever we talk about supply chain, but this session made us look towards it through a completely different lens. So thank you once again, Daryl, for your time. We were honored to have you here amidst us. Wish you a very great weekend ahead.
Yes, the honor is mine, and I know it's been a long day. Thank you all for hanging in there for me and listening to my presentation as well. I really enjoyed it, and look forward to speaking with you all at other times in the future.
Thank you so much, Daryl. That
Thank
means
you.
a lot.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. So guys, we have now arrived to the end of the event, and I would like to invite Anam Gwaliore, again, the General Secretary of the Placement Committee, XLRI XPGDM, to deliver the final vote of thanks.
Can you give me 1 minute? I'm just joining. I'm facing some technical glitches.
No worries, we can wait there.
Sorry for the glitch. Thank you, Deepshika. I feel honored and privileged for having this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on this special occasion on behalf of the Placement Committee and the ExPGDM 2021-2022 batch. I would like to begin by first thanking all the honorable speakers who graced us with their presence and shared their invaluable insights on various aspects of sustainability in the context of operations and supply chain that would indeed play a crucial role in shaping our ideologies and making us better professionals and citizens of the world by paying attention to people, planet, and profits equitably. I would like to further thank our sponsors, Alive Health, for their generous support in duly rewarding young minds who show the grit to contribute towards achieving a sustainable future for us. Ladies and gentlemen, an event of this magnitude cannot happen over time. Drop by drop, a whole lake becomes. I would like to thank the immensely motivated and dedicated organizing team and all the volunteers who supported the team at every step. I cannot thank them enough for the involvement they've shown and the willingness they've expressed to take on the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zones. Further, I would like to convey deep regards and hearty thanks to our Honorable Placement Convener, Dr. Kanagraj, who through the support of the Placement Office has been a formidable driving force for not only this event, but for the plethora of initiatives that shaped the success of the current ExPGDM batch. He has spent several sleepless nights shaping a vision for the cohort and has been an indispensable entity in terms of helping this program leapfrog to be the world-class program that it is today. Finally, I would like to thank all our participants for their invaluable interactions that greatly contributed in making all the discussions truly enriching. I thus conclude this event with a big thank you and wish the upcoming cohort all the very best in taking this legacy forward of hosting relevant discussions that would act as a conduit in enabling this renowned institute towards making this world a better place. Thank you.
Guys, Max Spotlight.
Not here.